They started as oddities, little unmanned flying machines that Ukraine used to take out soldiers and Russian armor. Putin thought that Russia's sheer might would overcome, but he was wrong. Ukraine went from drone users to masters of the drone war. Now, what Ukraine figured out is tearing Russia's front lines apart, and there's one number that explains why: 80%. That number is important because, as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on January 26th, Ukraine's drones are now responsible for the destruction of 80% of Russian targets in the Ukraine war. We'll explain what that means in terms of pure numbers in a moment. However, Zelensky was quick to point out that Ukraine's evolution and its ability to stay one step ahead of Russia on the battlefield is what allowed this to happen. Drones have become Ukraine's most important weapon, and the sheer scale of their use is also aiding Ukraine in making better and more efficient use of the other weapon systems that it deploys against Russia, along with the very soldiers who are fighting tooth and nail to prevent Russia from taking the country's territory. Today, artillery matters, but in a different way. Personnel, and above all our infantry, carry out fundamental tasks, Zelensky noted. But war itself is undergoing an evolution, and everything is becoming extremely dependent on another important element as well, on who is the fastest and the strongest in applying technologies, in adapting technologies, and in truth, verification of what is happening on the battlefield. That mention of verification brings us to the question of how Ukraine knows what its drones are destroying. The answer is that the very drones it uses are filming everything so that Ukraine has proof to back its claims. Business Insider has more comments from Zelensky, who provides a basic overview of the system that Ukraine is using to verify its drone strikes. Each of these strikes is recorded, which helps not only with hit verification, but also with the operation of the bonus-based system for assessing military performance, Ukraine's president pointed out. He's talking about a relatively new system that Ukraine has introduced in which the country's drone units are able to earn points for each battlefield kill they're able to record using their drones. These points can be amassed and then spent in Ukraine's Brave One marketplace, which offers drone operators access to new drones and equipment they can use to enhance their efficiency as killing machines. It's the gamification of warfare made real. And though it may seem like something out of a warped dystopian future, this system showcases just how innovative Ukraine can be in terms of both rewarding its soldiers and ensuring that false information isn't allowed to pollute the airwaves of online channels. The Guardian reported on Ukraine's points for kills system in early November. It recounted information delivered by the man who was then Ukraine's first deputy prime minister and is now, perhaps uncoincidentally, Ukraine's new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov. The man behind Ukraine's new system explained in November that the idea had grown to the point that 400 of Ukraine's drone units were taking part. That's massive growth, considering the number of units was just 95 in August. The drone operators racking up their points can spend them on over 100 different drones, autonomous vehicles, and other drone-related materials, Fedorov told The Guardian. There's even a leaderboard. Getting to the top is an extra bit of motivation for Ukrainian soldiers who want to do whatever they can to stop Russia in its tracks. It's become truly popular among units, Fedorov told The Guardian, adding, "All the defense forces know about this, and there's competition for the points, for getting these drones, electronic warfare systems, and other things to help them in warfighting. The more infantry you kill, the more drones you get to kill more infantry. This is becoming kind of a self-reinforcing cycle." Further emphasizing how important drones have become to Ukraine's strategy against Russia, Zelensky also took the opportunity to reward some of the country's leading drone commanders at an event where he highlighted the 80% figure. The Order of the Gold Star, which is also known as the Hero of Ukraine medal, and is among the country's highest military honors, went to two commanders of Ukrainian drone units. Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Veit of the 427th Separate Brigade, also known as RARO, received the honor, as did Major Yuri Fedorenko of Ukraine's 429th Separate Brigade, which is perhaps better known as the Achilles Brigade. It's no surprise that these two men received their medals. Their units combined to destroy more than 42,000 enemy targets, Euromaidan press reports. And that brings us nicely back to something we mentioned we'd tell you earlier in the video. We know that Ukraine's drones are now responsible for destroying 80% of the Russian targets being taken out in the war. However, that wouldn't mean much if it was 80% of 100 targets. Context matters, and when it comes to the scale of Russian losses, the numbers are massive. In 2025 alone, Ukraine's drones struck almost 820,000 targets, which is a number so huge that Putin must be wondering what he can possibly do to bring it back down. Most of these strikes have been recorded and verified, often using the first-person view cameras built into most of Ukraine's drones, the president of Ukraine's website says. Interestingly, this revelation of how many targets Ukraine's drones struck in 2025 also leads us to understand how many targets the country has verified that it hit in total during the last year. Dividing 820,000 by 0.8, gives us a grand total of 1.025 million targets hit. And remember, these are just the targets that Ukraine has been able to verify. But even with this number, we can tell that Ukraine hit an average of 85,416 Russian targets per month in 2025, which breaks down to a little over 2,800 targets daily. In other words, Russia is getting hit over 100 times per hour as it tries to break Ukraine's defenses, which likely goes a long way toward explaining why Russia's gains have been so slow and small over the last 4 years. And it gets worse for Russia. What we're seeing right now is that Ukraine's monthly numbers are rising, which means that it's more than possible that Ukraine's drones will crack 1 million targets destroyed in 2026. It's unknown if the 2025 number also includes Russian Shahed drones taken out by Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles. But that's a topic to which we'll return when we examine how important drones have become to Ukraine on the defensive side of things. As for the monthly numbers rising, Zelensky himself hinted at this when he shared Russia's confirmed death toll for December as a result of Ukraine's drone strikes. Our bonus-based electronic point system is working to scale up the results of our defense. In December, our units achieved a result of 35,000 neutralized occupiers. Thank you for this result, Zelensky said. I'll repeat that. 35,000 Russian soldiers dead, not injured, in a single month. This is a record-breaking number, and it comes off the back of 2 other months where Ukraine's drone kill count was enormous. As Zelensky revealed in early January, Ukraine's drone operators managed to eliminate 26,000 Russian soldiers in October, followed by 30,000 in November. The numbers are rising by an average of 4,500 Russians killed by drones per month, which has to be terrifying for Putin as he struggles with finding competent manpower to send into Ukraine. Forces News has even more numbers for December. In addition to repeating the figures that Zelensky shared, the outlet adds that what appears to now be a kill rate of between 30,000 and 40,000 per month is high enough that Russia is likely no longer recruiting enough soldiers to make up for its substantial losses in Ukraine. It also adds further context, noting that Russia losing soldiers in this volume means that Putin is allowing what amounts to be the equivalent of half of the UK Army's full-time personnel to be wiped out every single month. Unsustainable is one word that we could use to describe this. Absolute insanity seems like the more accurate term. Forces News also notes that Ukraine struck a total of 107,000 targets with its drones in December alone, which is also a month that saw Russia lose 128 of its air defense systems. Ukraine says that it's given itself a new target to hit 50,000 Russian troops eliminated using drones every single month. And the scariest thing for Putin is that this is a very achievable target. After all, it's not like Ukraine is going to be running out of drones anytime soon. As former Forbes correspondent David Axe claimed in March 2025, Ukraine started 2025 with a target of producing 4.5 million drones per year. It may not have quite hit that target, though it's difficult to tell. Business Insider says that the number was actually 2.5 million FPV drones, which means we have a contradiction. However, the same outlet also notes that other estimates matched the 4.5 million figure that Axe shared, and that this number may be Ukraine's current drone manufacturing capacity, if not the number of drones built. We don't know for sure because there have been no manufacturing numbers shared by official Ukrainian sources. However, either 2.5 million or 4.5 million is a huge number when you consider what we shared earlier about Ukraine carrying out 1 million drone strikes in 2025. It's also a number that Euromaidan Press reports is going to get a whole lot bigger. On January 26th, Euromaidan Press reported that Ukraine's drone manufacturing volume has roughly doubled every year since 2023. And for 2026, the outlet claims Ukraine is shooting for the production of 7 million drones. This will be a costly annual production run. Ukraine will need $120 billion to build and acquire 7 million drones, about half of which will come from a combination of Ukraine's own budget and loans backed by the European Union. The other half will have come from Ukraine's allies in the form of military assistance. But if Ukraine can put all of the pieces together, any hope Putin had that the Russian death count will go down will be squashed, as Ukraine will have plenty of drones to achieve its new target of 50,000 eliminations per month. Quick side note, there's a whole lot more where this came from, so if you're getting value from the military show and you want to hear about more statistics like this, don't forget to subscribe. With the numbers covered, we can return to something we touched on earlier. We mentioned that it's unclear whether the number of targets that Ukraine's drones have destroyed included the elimination of Russian unmanned aerial vehicles during the Kremlin-ordered drone and missile assaults that battered Ukraine throughout 2025. Whether they did or didn't is largely immaterial, as what matters more is the point that Ukraine doesn't just use its drones to inflict massive losses on the military. Ukraine uses drones for defense. And 2026 may be a game changer in terms of how effective Ukraine becomes at using its drones to intercept Russia's Shahed-type strike drones. Again, Zelensky touched on this in his January 26th address, where he emphasizes the importance of Ukraine's continued development of technologies that it can use to take out Russia's Shahed-type drones. There's one technology on which Ukraine will be focusing in particular, so keep watching to find out what that is. Before that, Zelensky is certainly right about the scale and danger of the Russian Shahed problem. We learned that from an analytical review of Russia's Shahed strategy in 2025, which was written by Igor Anokin and published by the Institute for Science and International Security. In his analysis, Anokin said that the size of Russia's Shahed-type drone waves varied throughout 2025, with some attacks including several dozen drones, while others included swarms so massive that 800 drones were used. Many of these drones were launched alongside cruise and ballistic missiles from the occupied regions of Crimea and Donetsk, Anokin added. He also delivered numbers. 54,538 Shahed-type drones launched in 2025, with about 32,200 of them being strike drones. Presumably, the others were decoy Shahed types sent to confuse or wear down Ukraine's air defenses. Regardless, Russia has been attacking everything that it can with its long-range drones. Its strikes were widespread, covering many of the regions that Russia's ground forces are trying to occupy, in addition to occasionally seeing Russian drones enter the territories of other countries such as Poland, Romania, and Moldova. Though Russia would claim to be hitting military targets, many of its Shahed types instead attacked Ukrainian energy infrastructure, particularly toward the end of 2025, industrial facilities and residential buildings. The scale of Russia's Shahed strikes peaked in July, when it launched an average of 203 of these types of drones at Ukraine daily. However, the following months were almost as damaging, with the average varying between 133 and 188 drones per day for the months after July. In short, Russia's Shahed-type drones are a serious problem for Ukraine. But as with so many of the problems that Putin's strategy presents, Ukraine has come up with new ways to handle it that just so happen to include the use of its own drones. Interceptor drones are the next big thing for Ukraine, as evidenced by the September 2025 announcement that the UK was going to start mass-producing one of these drones of Ukrainian design for use in defending against Russia's Shahed strikes. These special kinds of drones do what their name implies. They take to the skies and intercept incoming strike drones. On January 20th, the Kyiv Post published these interceptor drones were going to become part of what it dubbed an anti-drone dome, which will also include mobile defense teams. These teams will work in tandem with Ukraine's drone operators to provide a powerful short-range defense against Russia's Shahed types. Fedorov was among those who introduced the new system, stating, "Our task is to build an anti-drone dome over Ukraine, a system that does not react after the fact, but destroys the threat even during its approach." The implication here is that Ukraine expects Russia to either maintain or intensify its long-range strikes in 2026. Ukraine is responding, and interceptor drones are going to be a huge part of its new defensive strategy. If the Shahed types that these interceptor drones destroy are counted towards Ukraine's totals for 2026, then it seems almost certain that 1 million or more Russian targets will be destroyed by Ukraine's drones in 2026. That's especially the case when taking Ukraine's new goal of eliminating more than 50,000 Russian troops monthly into account. However, that's all for the future. Returning to what Ukraine achieved in 2025 with its drone strikes, we're seeing several battlefield impacts that have resulted. Among them is the fact that Ukraine's drones are causing the attrition of Russia's munitions at a scale never before seen. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which reported on January 27th that the Kremlin has placed an order for 1.1 million new artillery rounds. That alone wouldn't be newsworthy, but what's notable here is that Russia is focusing on the acquisition of long-range artillery rounds because Ukraine's FPV drone walls have forced it to pull its artillery so far back that it's becoming ineffective. Short-range rounds aren't cutting it anymore. Russia is losing artillery systems to Ukraine's drones, and when those systems try to fire from their pulled-back positions, Russia is also losing shells that fail to reach their targets. Of the 1.1 million rounds ordered, 1 million are for special 152mm MSTA rounds that contain a special propellant charge that allows them to travel over larger distances. The other 100,000 are for long-range variants. What matters here is the cost, as reported by Euromaidan Press. A standard MSTA artillery round costs Russia $1,250. The version with the propellant charge costs $1,550. That's a $300 difference, and when you multiply that by 1 million shells, you get a $300 million expenditure that is being caused mostly by Ukraine's FPV drones taking out Russian artillery and crews that dare come within range of the targets that the drones are protecting. If Ukraine can't eliminate artillery from the field, it can make the use of it cost more than ever for Russia. But when we're speaking about attrition, we inevitably have to come back to the sheer scale of the losses that Ukraine has inflicted on Russia with its drones. We've already discussed the monthly figures and Ukraine's goal of raising those figures using its drones. For Russia, these losses may be leading it toward a breaking point from which there is no return. That's the opinion of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who said in January that up to 25,000 Russian soldiers are being killed by Ukraine every single month. That estimate is lower than the numbers Ukraine itself shares, though it's still more than enough to cause serious manpower problems for Putin. Rutte explained that a single month of fighting in Ukraine now costs Russia about 10,000 more soldiers than its entire campaign against Afghanistan during the decade-long war Russia waged in that country. Now they lose this amount or more in 1 month, Rutte said when comparing Russia's 15,000 losses in Afghanistan to what it's experiencing in Ukraine. So that's also unsustainable on their side. The emphasis on Russian soldiers killed rather than wounded is also important, another thing that can be attributed to Ukraine's drones. According to Ukraine Today, the traditional death-to-injury ratio that an invading force should experience is 1 death for every 3 injuries. That isn't Russia's ratio. By the end of 2025, the outlet reports that Russia's share of dead soldiers amounted to 56% of its total casualties. That means more Russian soldiers are being killed than wounded, with the ratio now standing at 12 killed for every 10 wounded. Russia has contributed to this situation by failing to evacuate the wounded and using tactics forced upon it by the depletion of its armor, which is another thing for which Ukraine can thank its drones. However, it's Ukraine's use of drones and clever innovations, such as the gamification that we talked about earlier, that is making the big difference. It all adds up to Ukraine turning the territory that Russia wants to capture into a hellscape for Russia's forces. Now, any soldier who ventures anywhere within 10 miles of the combat lines is at risk of being destroyed by one of Ukraine's drones. And if Ukraine has its way in 2026, we haven't seen anything yet with its 2025 numbers. All of this discussion about drones, and we haven't even covered the long-range unmanned aerial vehicles that Ukraine used to wreak havoc on Russia in 2025. But don't fret, Ukraine is still very much all in on its deep strike strategy. We saw that just when Ukraine took brutal revenge on Russia for a series of strikes that left many in Kyiv without heating, electricity, and water. Find out what Ukraine did in response by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more in-depth examinations of the key statistics that define the Ukraine war. And thank you for watching.